Now
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's a Friday, and you betcha we're in love, and we're ready for this weekend, and it's going to be a beautiful one. Thanks for starting it with us here on O'Connor and Company. It's 5:06, and there's Patrice Onwuka. I love seeing your bright, shiny face on a Friday morning, Patrice.
Happy Friday, Larry. Can you feel the energy? It's a Friday. It's a Friday.
It is. This is definitely a Friday. We have made it, and let's get right to it because it's a super busy one in front of us. Look at all the friends we have to help us out. Coming up at 6:35, the chairman of the Fairfax Republican Party, Steve Knotts. At 7:05, Fred Flates. He's the vice chair of American First Policy Institute Center. Talk about this plan to release 5 Americans from Iran in a prisoner exchange. But
I know,
what's the small print look like? 7:35, our old pal Steve Moore, economist, on the inflation news yesterday. 8:05, Kash Patel, another old Fred, coming to join us about the outrages coming out of the Justice Department. And then at 8:35, well, look at that. It's another old Fred. Ken Cuccinelli will be joining us, talk about election reform. And he's officially part of the DeSantis team, so we'll have him talk about why he thinks Ron DeSantis should be the Republican nominee for president. Boy, that's a lot, isn't it, Patrice Onwuka?
It is. We're stacked today.
Yeah, and we've got a lot to talk about, but I want to talk about first the fact that Joe Biden wants more money for Ukraine. He plans on asking Congress for another installment of tens of billions of dollars for the effort in Ukraine. And I'm not so sure if it's going to be as easygoing in Congress as he had up until this point. And I want to point out here, before we get into the details of it, that I think that Patrice and I both agree, based on the conversations we've had over this past year or two, that we're not on the side of Russia in this fight. Russia's the aggressor. Their tanks should not have rolled across that border in Ukraine. Ukraine is the victim here. But at the same time, I don't want to speak for you, Patrice, but I think the best thing possible going forward at this point is we start moving toward a negotiated peace in this. There needs to be some sort of end game. There needs to be a resolution. All we're hearing from one side of the equation is unequivocal, unconditional surrender by Putin is the only thing that will be accepted, and a full retreat from all territories, including the Crimean Peninsula, which he invaded under the Obama administration, and Joe Biden said nothing about it back then. But now he's got to, pull out everything. Listen, I'm no geopolitical expert here, but I don't see Vladimir Putin as the kind of guy who will accept an unconditional surrender. And if our policy is we just got to spend whatever it takes, that's what we keep hearing from people who are in favor of financing the Ukraine war. Whatever it takes, whatever it takes, whatever it takes. Well, whatever it takes is pretty ambiguous. They better tell us what it takes. Otherwise, I don't think they're going to be a whole lot of Republicans ready, or at least not a majority, to line up and give more money to this effort. They're now asking for $24 billion more dollars for Ukraine. And yet they couldn't find a couple of $1 billion lying around to finish building our wall and protect our border, Patrice. So again, that's sort of where I stand on it. I do think it's a noble cause. I do think that Ukraine is the victim here. They should be able to defend themselves, and we should be able to help them in that fight. But we're not even allowed to look at the money that we've already spent to make sure that it was spent properly.
Well, and you're highlighting a really important piece, accountability. And so I think there are many conservatives, not just members of Congress, but voters who are saying, well, wait a minute. How has the money that has gone out been spent so far? What has it accomplished? What has been lost and wasted? And then part two of that is, okay, now if Congress is going to do it, how does it get done? We were talking offline before we jumped on here that before the aid so far has been attached to different must-pass spending bills.
That's right.
So which was an easy way to ensure that the money was delivered.
Yeah,
right?
My favorite one, I think it was the second package of billions of dollars of aid that Nancy Pelosi pushed through with Joe Biden. It was attached to hurricane relief funding for Florida.
That's right.
So if you wanted to vote for hurricane relief FEMA funding for Florida when they were battered by those hurricanes that hit Naples, the only way you could vote for that and support that hurricane relief is if you were also voting for Ukraine or war relief. There's never been a standalone bill.
Which is obviously a strategy, right? It's to ensure that it had to pass. Otherwise, you would be the boogeyman for not helping Florida relief efforts.
Yep.
Well, Speaker Kevin McCarthy earlier this year, he has said, listen, any further funding bill for further funding for Ukraine is going to need to come through the annual appropriations process, which is going on right now. And that's important because that is when every member of specific members of Congress have to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to vote yes or no on this amount of funding for this issue or for this agency. That gets them on the record. And that means that if you vote, you're either voting for this or you're voting against it. It's not so much like, well, I'm going to use it as cover because I want to support Florida hurricane relief efforts. So yeah, we're going to green light funding for Ukraine. No, this is actually saying this is the right process.
Yeah.
We have an appropriations process, and we're going to fund additional funding through that process, which allows for some consideration and discussion about how much and what's going on with this money.
That's right. And the bullying tactics that we've gotten from this administration, from establishment figures in D.C., those who are all in favor of spending money on any military conflict that involves our equipment and certainly our military personnel. Anytime you call into question as to whether there's any corruption involved in the Ukrainian government, God forbid there's any corruption in Ukraine, attached to this money, you are bullied, you're attacked, you're slimed, you're slandered, you're told that you're it's the old political game we've seen for the last, 2 administrations now. If you dare to question something like this, you're a stooge of Vladimir Putin, you're playing into Russian propaganda, you're probably a foreign actor and taking foreign money. No, none of those things. We're just, challenging whether this is the appropriate use of our federal treasury, especially, again, I want to go back to this, compared to what we're told we're not allowed to spend money on. Sean Davis, our friend who is the co-publisher of Federalist, he said it very succinctly. He said, if you want to know how much the ruling regime hates you, remember they refused to spend $7 billion to build a border wall. Then they refused to cut you a check for $2,000 after they locked you in your house, banned your kids from school, and got you fired from work over the virus that it paid the Chinese Communist Party to create, when you put it that way.
Yikes.
Meanwhile, the country that paid, and here's the bottom line, this request for additional billions, tens of billions of dollars to Ukraine comes at the exact same time we're learning the full extent to how bad actors and oligarchs in Ukraine paid the Biden family tens of millions of dollars over the years. And I'm sorry, we're just supposed to look the other way. Hey, that country and the government that paid my family tens of millions of dollars so my son, the crackhead, could buy a Porsche, we want to give them a bunch of federal money too. And here's the other problem that we need to look at. If we keep using this apocalyptic language about the Russia-Ukraine war, and we keep saying we've got to spend whatever it takes to stop Russia. Well, if we're willing to spend whatever it takes, we're a very small hop, skip, and a jump, or maybe just a baby step away from saying we have to deploy our troops to stop Russia from doing this.
But here's the challenge, Larry. I just pulled up some polling data. 55% of Americans support authorizing more money for Ukraine, but that's a significant decline. Actually, sorry, let me correct myself. CNN poll this week, 55% of Americans said lawmakers should not authorize additional funding to support.
More money.
So a majority now opposes. This is a flip. Remember, Americans were in full support of this, of the United States' support. And I know we're probably coming up on a break.
Yeah.
That support has flipped. So
that has flipped. In fact, in a moment, we're going to show you exactly how that public support flip, as you just mentioned correctly, Patrice, manifests itself in a segment on CNN. And wait till you see how the media responds to that, how the people in corporate media and legacy media like CNN are dumbfounded that the American people dare to stand up and say, wait a minute, maybe enough is enough on the Ukraine spending. So we're going to play that for you in just a moment. But first, it's Friday. That always adds extra challenges to your commute. 5:15, WMAL traffic and weather. Every 10 minutes first on the fives.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Later this morning in the Chris Plant Show, Anheuser-Busch heir Billy Bush says he wants to buy back Bud Light and make Bud Light great again. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
So CNN's John King decides to do one of those impromptu roundtables of average American voters and ask them if the United States should continue supporting Ukraine in the war. Are these specifically Republican voters? Do we know? I believe it is Republican voters. Could very well be Republican voters in Iowa. I mean, that would be the relevant roundtable to have. Here's what happened when he asked about Ukraine.
If you think the United States should be supporting Ukraine in the fight against Putin, raise your hand. Nobody.
Listen to how sad he sounds, too. Nobody.
Well, that's not surprising, Larry. So the CNN poll I was quoting just before the break, where 55% of Americans oppose additional funding, 71% of Republicans especially do not support approving more funding. So it is not surprising. I think Americans are rightly saying, wait a minute, where is our money going? Why is our money not being spent here in the United States? And the Ukrainian government has a lot to answer for.
It's funny thing about the American people, the second you find out that if you hold a certain opinion, you're going to be demonized, called names, said that you're not a appropriate member of polite society, that you're on the wrong side of history, and all the things that they throw at you. When it's something as basic as how we spend our tax dollars on a foreign war, we tend to sort of get our backs up. We say, oh, really? I'm not allowed to think that? Well, I'm going to think that even more now. And so now listen. So now John King goes back to the studio and he talks to Dana Bash. They do a little exchange here. Hold on, John King and Dana Bash having a little exchange. That resulted.
She's married, isn't she?
Well, yeah, but years ago, John King and Dana Bash had a little exchange, and it resulted in a baby. I'm just saying.
Wait, what?
I don't want to pry to. Oh, you didn't know that about those two?
I did not know.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's a long. Anyway, meanwhile, then an intern showed up, and it just got ugly. It got very ugly. Anyway. Here's John King and Dana Bash having a different kind of exchange. And listen to the condescension here. Listen to the disbelief, how dumbfounded they are, that people aren't listening to us. People aren't doing what we've told them to do.
When you hear the Ukraine exchange there, it's like watching the open of an old Tucker Carlson show. He's not there anymore, but that's what it is. And these are busy.
I love they can't get Tucker out of their mind. Tucker still occupies their brain. Brian Stelter probably wakes up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. Tucker!
People. These are hardworking people. There are too many Democrats who want to say they're deplorables or, why talk to these people? There are millions of them.
Listen to how they're talking about them. They're deplorables. Why talk about their crime is they don't want to keep throwing tens of billions of dollars at the Ukraine war. That's their crime against humanity here. But he's right. Democrats would say, why would you even talk to people like that? Hang on, there's more.
This is a family that literally is an economic anchor in the community. The business started in the basement, employs 80 people. The new solar company employs 15 people in a part of the country that has been devastated economically and challenged economically the last 25 years. They're good people. They raise money for the Girl Scouts. They go to church. But they believe things that would break our fact-check machine. That's just a fact. And they don't trust us. They think we're part of the problem.
Because you're not part of the problem. You are the epicenter of the problem. I mean, come on now, John. Come on now. He doesn't really think what he's saying is actually right.
Well, listen. He's trying. He's bending over backwards to recognize the reality of the fact that these are average Americans who deserve respect, deserve love, and don't deserve to be demeaned.
Vilified.
Yet at the same time, he's demeaning them and vilifying them. He said they believe lies. When he says they believe things that wouldn't pass our fact-check machine, good, because the CNN fact-check machine is not about facts.
It's kind of broken.
Yeah.
There's something interesting about this whole exchange, which is, number one, I'm glad they brought these regular folks in, and I hope they continue to do this, because maybe the voice of regular people is the balance that is missing from CNN. You're not going to the analysts provide no balance. They have one or two conservatives and maybe Trump supporters, and I put conservatives in quotation marks because most of the people on the Republicans they bring on, like Adam Kinzinger, I do not.
Yes, you are right to put it in quotation marks.
So they are so skewed, and their glasses are so frosted over with Democratic cow manure that they can't see regular people don't wear those same glasses. So if there's any shining light, I hope it's that they continue to do these panels.
Yeah.
Even if it means demeaning the American people, because at least then it exposes how elitist they are and how out of touch they are.
By the way, this last point John King. This last point John King made about how they think CNN's part of the problem. They don't believe what we're telling them. Gee, I wonder why. As our friend Stephen Miller over at Spectator points out, In the last couple of weeks, CNN has had two big new hires as analysts going into the political season here for the election. Number one, the former White House communications director for Joe Biden, and number two, the former communications director for Vice President Kamala Harris. They're now CNN employees brought in to analyze the upcoming election. Gee, I wonder why people are skeptical about whether they're getting just the full truth and unbiased truth from CNN. I don't know, John. Maybe the calls are coming from inside the house. It's 5:23. We've got news. Speaking of CNN, we've got news about Don Lemon and where he might finally land to continue that stunning, electrifying, and necessary career. You'll love to hear what he wants to do next, and you will next on WMAL.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
New. Now.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:36 on this Friday morning, August 11th, and we are chugging along here with a busy, full slate of topics. 6:35, Steve Knotts, chairman of the Republican Party in Fairfax County. There's a big rally planned this Sunday, by the way, for parents' rights in Fairfax, featuring all your candidates. We'll tell you all about it. 7:05, Fred Fleitz, vice chair of America First Policy Institute and the Center for American Security, talk about this issue with Iran and 5 American prisoners. Hostages. 7:35, Steve Moore, economist on the inflation issue. 8:05, Kash Patel, former federal prosecutor, talk all about the Trump indictments and the Biden family corruption. And at 8:35, Ken Cuccinelli. I'm Larry Connor with Patrice Onwuka. Good morning,
Hey,
Patrice.
good morning, Larry.
So we're talking about CNN, which leads us, of course, to our favorite CNN personality. We miss him so much.
Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry. When a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s.
What are you talking about? Poppy Harlow's entire reaction in this exchange is still my favorite. Don Lemon, of course, who was going to reinvent mornings for CNN, and boy, did he ever! We are trouncing.
He did.
We imagine if we were on TV. I mean, good Lord, we're just as a little radio show. We're trouncing CNN, and because Don Lemon ruined everything they had going for them. Don Lemon, of course, fired for his incompetence and his behavior
belligerence
behind
towards
the scenes.
his co-hosts, right?
But absolutely, and not to mention, this.
I'm just saying Nikki Haley should be careful about saying that politicians are not in their prime and they need to be in their prime when they serve, because she wouldn't be in her prime according to Google or whatever it is.
Anyway, people have been wondering what's going to happen with Don Lemon. Where's he get? Because a talent like that can't be stifled. You can't put a pillow over the brightness of a luminescent star like Don Lemon, and not have beams of his aura shooting out across the hemisphere. So he's going to end up somewhere. Mm-hmm. And Patrice, you seem to have uncovered rumors out there at Radar Online that suggest that he's trying to position himself for quite the gig. Where are we going to find Don Lemon next?
Well, let's put some clues together. He's going to be surrounded by women who are not in their prime, who are talking on lots of different subjects, from politics to pop culture, and they're all left-leaning. None other than The View.
The View. He's going to be one of the...
Yeah,
I thought it was an all-woman panel show.
Well, what is a woman these days, Larry? I mean, or maybe Don would be breaking the gender barrier on this show. But apparently he is trying to butter up all the hosts. He had this big party at his glorious mansion to celebrate Sunny Hostin's book release. And apparently he was pitching to the different hosts there about him coming on the show. He reportedly has also pitched it to Whoopi Goldberg. So, we'll see whether they're going to bite. I mean, Don on The View with a bunch of cackling women who have no clue about what's going on, it probably works.
I want this to happen for a lot of reasons, but the National Enquirer apparently was the first to to break this.
They're right
Sources
sometimes,
said Lemon has soured on former TV chat queen Wendy Williams now that she no longer has a show and didn't bother to invite her to the bash. You're a friend of Wendy, or not a friend, but you're a fan of Wendy Williams' show.
No, not really.
Oh, all right. I thought you liked Wendy Williams. Meanwhile, Desperate Don is allegedly burning up the phone lines to call Whoopi Goldberg about nabbing a guest spot on the Gab Fest, hinting he would be a great guest and an even better co-host. Don's pushing himself on all of the women on the show, the source claimed. Word is the View's liberal ladies have their reservations about divisive Don because he's been accused of spewing verbal abuse at a former female co-anchor. See, this is why I want Don Lemon there, because he will, within a month, they'll all be screaming at each other. It'll be the biggest cat fight you'll ever see.
Well, that's what would make it such great TV.
Yes.
Listen, he already moved to morning, so we're used to seeing Don Lemon out of the dark shadows of the night without champagne in his hands. Yeah. We're used to now seeing him in the morning with his turtlenecks and his and blazers over it and looking like a professor. So I think he would actually fit in well there. He's gonna claim to bring the news angle. None of those hosts are actually journalists in any way or form. No. And he certainly is very connected to the company talking points at CNN and frankly just the Democratic Party.
He's in the New York social scene. He's hosting everyone at his New York Long Island mansion. I mean,
Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry.
What are we going to do about the women on The View, though? Because, I mean, if Nikki Haley isn't in her prime, what are we to say about Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg?
And probably Sunny Hostin.
They've got about 20 years on Nikki Haley, though. I mean,
that's true.
Are we going to have a segment on that?
Sorry.
You know what? I'm pals with Meghan McCain, who, by the way, has never been happier since she left that show.
Oh, I can imagine.
I want to run this past her. I would have bounced it off her because the drama that you see at that table on camera pales in comparison to the behind the scenes green room makeup room drama.
Which is why Don needs to be there. At this point, a lot of women's circles have a catty gay male friend. I'm just saying.
You know what?
Another Don idiom.
Now that I think about it, Meghan McCain and Don Lemon have a mutual friend, Andy Cohen from the Bravo. And remember, Andy Cohen is the one who used to doing shots with Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon on New Year's Eve, and Meghan's pals with him. Maybe she could engineer this and make it. I'm telling you, this could bring Meghan McCain back to that table just to watch the horror.
Let's get rid of Farrah. Get rid of what's her name?
Right.
Please.
We want Whoopi, Joy, Don Lemon, and Meghan McCain. That's what the world wants.
Must-watch TV right there.
And ironic update now on that creepy, disgusting lab that was, illegal lab operating in a warehouse just outside of Fresno, California, owned by a Chinese corporation, which, of course, any Chinese corporation doing business in the U.S. is linked back to the Communist Chinese Party. You'll remember when we told you about this story, the lab was discovered and they found over 1,000 lab mice that had been genetically altered and infected with various horrible diseases, including COVID-19, including HIV, all of these disgusting things. They were, and we've now learned, and I remember jokingly saying, half jokingly saying at the end of the segment we did on it, I said, just wait. It'll be about a month or so, but we'll find out that we helped fund this lab. Anthony Fauci wrote the grant to start the lab, right, as a joke. Well, I shouldn't joke about these things because it turns out, yes, this biolab in California received $500,000 in U.S. taxpayer money. Prestige Biotech, Inc. They received their $500,000 tax credit from the U.S. government before it was then taken over by this Chinese corporation. Wow. But it's the same company. And Congressman Kevin Kiley of California uncovered more information here and revealed it, that Governor Newsom's administration in the state of California in 2019 awarded an additional $360,000 tax credit.
Oh, my goodness.
To this biolab. It was run by Prestige Biotech. The owners live in China. They're part of the Chinese Communist apparatchik. operating without a license, committing numerous code violations. You try, in California, of all places in California, which is really Maryland but with palm trees, you try operating a business without a license and how quickly they come and crack down on you. Mice at the lab were genetically engineered. Fresno city manager said they were bad actors. They never came to the city. They moved up in the middle of the night. Pretty big elements that tell us they did not want us to know they were there. And the CDC told the Associated Press it has no further action in the matter. The CDC is done. No federal investigation in this. Where's the Justice Department? Where's the FBI looking at the criminal intent here?
Thank you.
The Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, has called for an investigation. He wants the Select Committee on China to look into this. But where's Merrick Garland on this? It's almost as if the President of the United States is compromised in dealing harshly with anyone from China because his family received billions of dollars from China. That's what it looks like, but I'm not making that. I would never make such a claim.
Well, obviously, Larry, this is the kind of claim that you would never hear on any other network or station, on a lot of other stations. This is unfortunately, and I don't think this is the only lab or the only biotech company, Chinese-owned, operating here in the United States, doing secret, clandestine, sick types of experiments on animals. What if those lab rats had gotten out? They had, interestingly here, they found, when one of these locations was raided, they found vials of unlabeled chemicals. They literally learned later were chlamydia, E. coli, hepatitis B, herpes, malaria, rubella. Obviously, if someone wanted to do damage to a population in a state by releasing these viruses, this is an easy way to do it. You don't even need to, put someone on a plane and send them from another country. You now have locations near you, coming to a city near you, viruses, diseases that we've pretty much had under control, if not eradicated. I would think that the Biden administration should see this as a priority right now. Unfortunately, it's just another example of the Chinese Communist Party expanding its reach and influence within the U.S. sphere, and there's nothing for it. Nothing for it. No response from our federal government, unfortunately.
By the way, I want to remind everybody that we would not know anything about this black market lab that was dealing, as you mentioned, with E. coli, chlamydia, rubella, malaria, herpes, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. We wouldn't know anything about this if it weren't for a security guard walking around this industrial complex, and he noticed a garden hose. A garden hose that was sticking out and underneath from the building and underneath like a garage roll-up type door. Yeah. And it shouldn't have been. That's against the building's rules. So the security guard notices the hose.
Wow.
And then starts making some inquiries, and that's when they uncovered all of this stuff. And that's the only reason we know about it. So what else is going on in this country?
Thank you.
How many other people who have crossed this border illegally and set up shop in this country who mean us harm, who are acting like this? And you wonder where COVID came from in the first place. It's mind-boggling to think. This is why you need security in a country and why you need secure borders in your country.
It's crazy. Apparently, this company had been operating legally prior to its closure, with its facility licensed and permitted to, get this, Larry, produce pregnancy, ovulation, and menopause diagnostic tests.
Yeah.
So those over-the-counter tests that are super cheap these days, yikes.
Yeah,
Yikes.
This is who's making them. In fact, the black market lab had made 50,000 COVID tests that were on the 56,000 COVID diagnostic tests that were actually on the market in California and Texas, but then they were recalled because they lacked a pre-market approval from the Food and Drug Administration. This is, I mean, everything about this thing is a horror show, including, can I mention again, 1,000 dead and dying mice that had been genetically modified to catch and spread COVID. But the CDC says there's no further action, and the Justice Department has not initiated an investigation.
And meanwhile, the state of California does not want you to drive gas-powered vehicles. You've
Right.
got these Democrats who don't want you to have, light bulbs they want you to have these
That's
new
right.
light bulbs rather than traditional light bulbs. They
don't want your children to be able to go to school without wearing a
gas
mask.
stoves. It's ridiculous where their focus is, when their focus should be on the actual devastating public health concerns.
It's 5:54.